Hey, so see if you can relate to this at all. I've known what I've wanted for my life for a long time. But generally speaking, I've lacked the clarity, the consistency, and frankly, the bravery to make those things happen. And, maybe like you as well, I have tended to be drawn to the idea of, the new year and that this year is going to be different. This year is going to be the one. But here's the thing, right? New Year's resolutions don't really work. But here's what has started to work for me. Get ready for it. To treat my life more like I'm Moana, more like I'm Frodo, to treat my life more like an epic quest. So in this episode, I'm going to give you 10 quick questions inspired by this idea of the epic quest, treating our lives more like an epic quest. And these 10 quick questions, that only take a few minutes to fly through, are going to give you some clarity, some direction about what you need to do in your life to help 2021 not just be better than 2020, because, oh my goodness, that's such a low bar, right? But we want 2021 to be a year that we look back on as a really formative, pivotal year in our lives, a year that we started to do some big things, make some big changes. So who doesn't want that, right? If that sounds good to you, you're in the right place. Welcome to episode 1, the kickoff episode of Me and the Quest. Well, hey, what's going on? Really glad that you are here. If we're not already friends, hi, my name is Ben Crosswaite. I make music right now under the name Ben and the Family Quest. And this is the debut episode. This is Me and the Quest. This is a show about doing big, meaningful things in the world, making big, transformative changes in ourselves, and ultimately spending more time doing what we're alive to do. I mean, come on, who doesn't want some of that? I hope you like that tagline. I lost plenty of sleep trying to kind of summarize this, so let me know what you think of that. It's a show about doing big, meaningful things in the world, making big, transformative changes in ourselves, and ultimately spending more time doing what we're alive to do. That sums it up. That's where we're going. In this first episode, it's going to kind of serve two purposes. I think any good pilot episode, this is a pilot episode, not a trailer, right? So a trailer kind of shows you what's coming. A pilot just jumps into it and you kind of get thrown into the world. So that's what we want to do today. This episode is going to have a ton of value in and of itself. Like I said, we're going to hit 10 quick questions that you can start to ask yourself to get some clarity about what exactly it is you're going to do with your 2021, some really practical steps to make sure that you can have 2021 be a big year for you. But sort of the double purpose of this episode is that each of these questions are going to represent an idea that we are going to devote an entire episode to in the coming weeks and months, right? So I'm going to resist going into too much detail on any of these because I get excited, about all the ideas I have and the things I'm learning, sort of associated with all these questions I'm going to give you today. So just know that if this sort of piques your interest, or if you have some additional thoughts, make sure you comment, on YouTube or hit me up on Instagram at Me and the Quest or at Ben and the Family Quest. My shout out to myself threw off my groove there. What was I saying? I guess I was saying that look forward to getting more detail on all these questions as we move forward, as we move into season 1. But for now, we're just going to kind of hit them. And I think there's a ton of value if this is the only thing you ever see from me. If you do this exercise, I think there's just a ton of value here. So that's enough sort of intro and prologue. Let's get into it. So I'm sure this thing will sort of take shape as we go. But for right now, my plan is for all the solo episodes, these episodes where I don't have guests, which is something I'm hoping to do in the future. But for the solo episodes, when it's just you and me, we are going to follow a 3-act structure for the episode. And, I'm going to keep these fairly short, so it's not going to, you don't have to feel like you're not settling in for a 2.5-hour podcast. But, we're going to quickly move through 3 acts. So the template's going to be like this. Act 1 is what do we want and what's the problem? All right. Act 2, what do we need to prevail? What do we need to overcome the problem? And Act 2 is going to be oftentimes where the real good stuff for the episode is going to be. So Act 2 is where we're going to get, what's the idea, the tool, the resource, the mindset change, What is, like, practically speaking, how are we going to overcome the problem that we just described to get the thing we want that we described in Act 1. Act 2 is where we're going to find out what we need to overcome the problem. And then Act 3, I really want to land the plane on every episode and make sure that when you stop listening or stop watching, that you know your next steps. You know what you should do if you want to put this stuff into action. So Act 3, I'm calling What Now? Okay? So that's where we're going. Let's do this thing. Act 1, what do we want and what's the problem? Now, there's sort of this assumption throughout the show that, generally speaking, if you're going to be a part of this, there's some amount of overlap with that tagline. Like, when we talk about the quest, what we want is we want to do some combination of some big, meaningful things that we want to do. There are some big, transformative, important changes we need to make in ourselves or want to make in ourselves. And this goal of sort of aligning our lives with our calling, with our vocation, with what we're here on the planet to do. I think there's going to be sort of just this underlying theme through every episode, everything that we talk about here, that's sort of the big umbrella that everything fits under, right? Those three categories. But then in each episode, I want to talk about, like, what's a specific thing as it relates to today's conversation. What do we want? So as we sit here at the end of 2020, a lot of talk about New Year's resolutions. I think it's always the case, but especially after a year like 2020, as if, these years that we have that are like 2020. No, it's its own thing, right? But anytime there's kind of a bad year, we are extra prone to treat the next year as if it's going to be some sort of magic switch being flipped and everything's going to be better. But of course, we need to actually take different action if we want different results. So what we want, as it relates to this conversation, what we want is we want 2021 to not just be better than 2020, but like I said in the intro, we want 2021 to be a year that is pivotal, that is transformative, a year that we can look back on for a long time as a great year. And not just a great year where, like, we had some fun. I hope we have fun. I hope 2021 is more fun than 2020, right? I want to travel. I want to, like, hang out with my friends and not feel weird about if we're contaminating each other, right? Like, that's something we all want, and that's totally fine. Let's have some more fun in 2021. But this is about something bigger too. This is about 2021 being a year where our story, our quest really starts. And I'm not talking about doing everything this year. Maybe I don't know what your goal is, but it's really about starting. It's about leaving home and starting on our quest and starting to head the right direction. So that's what we want. What's the problem? The problem is that we lack the clarity. And there's kind of two versions of lacking clarity, right? We know what we want, but we don't know how to get there. That's me most of the time. That's where I am most of the time. Like, I could tell you with pretty good detail, like, what I want to wake up and do every day. I know, like, the kind of experiences I want to have. I know some pretty clear details of what I want my life to be. How to get there? That's been a problem. What do I like? I know, like, in my dream world, when I've got everything I want, I know what I wake up and do every day. But I don't know what I wake up and do every day to get there, right? So that's been a real problem for me. Consistency, follow through, the bravery it takes to leave our comfort zone. And as it relates to this conversation, the big problem is that New Year's resolutions don't work. That's a big thing, right? So just deciding this year's going to be different doesn't work. Buying a nice, like, leather-bound yearly planner probably won't work. If we want to see some changes, I think the best way is to start treating our lives like an epic quest, right? So that actually brings us to Act 2. What do we need to prevail? So what we want is 2021 to be a formative, important, transformative year. What's the problem? New Year's resolutions don't work. We don't know what to do. Like, maybe we know what we want, And maybe it's a really abstract longing for just something different, or maybe it's a really clear goal. But the problem is that New Year's resolutions don't work. We don't actually know where to put our energy, where to spend our time. That's the problem. So what do we need to prevail? What do we need to overcome the problem and get what we want, what we long for? My tool for this episode is a quick list of 10 questions that are going to give us some clarity about next steps or maybe first steps heading into 2021 so that we can overcome the problem that is that gritting our teeth and just deciding it's going to be better doesn't work, and that we don't know what to do otherwise. We're going to overcome that problem and actually have 2021 be a great year. So without further ado, let's jump into these questions. All right, here we go. Question number 1. Where are you longing to go? This is a big question, and we're going to spend all of episode 2 next week talking about this. I've got a ton of really helpful questions and sort of resources to help us get really clear about defining this. We all have this idea of maybe someday I will blank. Okay? So when I say that, maybe someday I will blank, what do you feel in there? Yeah, so like I said, next week we're going to really dial this in. We're going to hone it. But for now, just start to think about that. What is it that you are longing for? Question number 2, what is home that you have to leave? What is the comfort zone that you have to leave, right? Every one of these stories, a lot of times in Disney movies, it's like literally leaving their parents' home, or having their parent, run over by a herd of wildebeest. Sometimes they're thrown into it, right? Other times they leave. Often it's some sort of combination of their hand kind of being forced, and they leave home. And the same is for us. And for some of you listening, maybe you need to literally move out of your parents' house. But that's not what I'm talking about, right? What is your comfort zone? What are your sort of coping mechanisms that you go to instead of doing the big things, right? Is it Netflix binges? Is it hanging out with those group of friends that kind of actually suck? Is it, like for me, an example for me is that I love making things and I'm super comfortable making them. But left to my own devices, I will just make things that no one ever sees. So like creativity, got all that. Yep, cool. I've got some skills and some things. Putting them out and actually like sharing them with the world, especially like on a consistent basis where people can judge me, and no thanks, right? So that's something I've been working on. That's the home I had to leave. I decided I'm just going to keep making stuff consistently and, try to just be vulnerable and put myself out there. That was a home that I defined, that I decided to leave. So what is home for you as it relates to your quest? What do you have to leave? What's the comfort zone you have to leave behind? Question 3, what is at stake? There's actually kind of 3 sub-questions to this one. What's at stake if you do nothing? What's at stake if you try and fail? What do you stand to gain if you succeed? I'll say that again just because I kind of flew through that. So what's at stake? And the 3 sort of sub-questions of that are, what will I lose if I do nothing? What will I lose if I try and I fail? And what do I stand to gain if I succeed? Okay, so start to define the stakes. Number 4 is, what is a door of no return that I can walk through? This is what's called Question number 4, what is a doorway of no return that I can walk through? This is what's called the inciting incident in a story, the point of no return. Sometimes the hero chooses it and is forced into the story. A lot of times the hero doesn't choose it, and some outside force throws them into the story, and that's where the action starts. But here's the thing. We can actually be our own outside source. We can, when maybe it's just when we're like jacked on caffeine and feeling good. Maybe it's, when after you listen to this podcast and hopefully you feel a little inspired and motivated. That sort of higher motivated, confident self can trap the self that wants to stay home. You can take an action. You can do something that is a doorway of no return. In a romantic comedy, right? This is it doesn't have to be a romantic comedy, just any sort of romantic movie, I guess. But it's the point where, the guy says to the girl, or vice versa, I actually see you as more than a friend. That's a doorway of no return. And maybe that's what you need to do in your real life. I don't necessarily recommend that, at least without, some thought. But, sign up for something, buy a ticket, quit a job. Again, maybe, if this is something you've never considered, don't hear me say quit your job and then pause this and instantly call your boss and quit. Please don't do that. This is about, you have something that you've wanted to do for a long time, something that you want to be true of your life. That's a deep, true calling that deep down is what you're supposed to do. How do you trap yourself into actually doing it? That's what I'm talking about, right? So what is a doorway of no return you can create for yourself, and then walk through and kick your story into motion? All right, the next three are related. So I'm going to hit them all kind of as a group, and then we'll break them down. So every hero has these three things in common. This is something I'm really excited to talk about in future episodes. But so here, I'll just fly over and then we'll dig into it. Number one, they have gifted superpowers. Number two, developed skills. And number three, potentially fatal shortcomings. Okay, so there's alliteration, some alliteration in there. Gotta love some alliteration. A little alliteration. Okay. First off, gifted superpowers. Okay, so superpowers are more abstract things that you bring to whatever environment you're in, and it's something you can't really turn on and off. It's just sort of who you are. So being great at Excel spreadsheets is not a superpower. Okay, that's a skill, which we'll talk about in a second. Superpowers are, so they're more abstract. Leadership qualities, empathy, creativity, service, working well as a sort of right-hand man, that sort of supportive, a details person, a vision person, you get it. So hopefully that kind of gets you thinking, and everything I just mentioned sounded very career-based, which is definitely a part of it. But this is, again, this is stuff that you bring to whatever environment you're in, your relationships, your work. What are, I'm going to say 1 to 3 for now. So write down 1 to 3. Maybe if you're having trouble defining it, you can write down up to 5. And then maybe in the episode that we devote to superpowers, we can kind of develop that with a little bit more clarity. So let's say 1 to 5, jot down some superpowers. Number 6, what are some developed skills? So this is where it's more specific. These are things that you've gotten good at. And so we want to somehow, if your land of maybe someday involves moving to a new city and becoming a chef, and you are also really great at making paper mache dolls. Probably don't need to write that down. I did not know what I was going to say when I started that sentence. If to follow up on what I said a minute ago, if you're great at Excel spreadsheets, and you want to be a famous musician, maybe you can use your spreadsheets. Actually, that's a good example. Maybe you use that spreadsheet skill to plan and run the business side of because a lot of artists, looking at myself here, are not naturally gifted in sort of the business planning side of things. So maybe you have some real skills at that stuff, but you want to be an artist. Maybe you use that spreadsheet skill to make you a better artist. So when you think about your skills, obviously somewhat related to what you want to do, but also some sort of adjacent skills can be helpful. And then number whatever, I think this is 7. What are some of your potentially fatal shortcomings? We don't get into a movie or a book unless there's a real at least we sense there's a real chance that the hero is gonna fail, that there's something that's gonna be the hero's undoing. And here's like a little bomb to drop that will maybe help you define your potentially fatal shortcomings. A lot of times, it's at least some of our shortcomings are a shadow side of our superpower. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'm tempted to sort of tease that out, but I'm just gonna leave that there. We'll talk about this in future episodes. So what are your shortcomings? A couple examples, like maybe you're just lazy, maybe you care too much what other people think, maybe you're too driven, maybe maybe you're great at getting like career goals, but you're failing in some other areas of your life. So those are some examples. What might be your undoing? And we'll talk obviously about what can we then do to mitigate that. Obviously being aware of it and like putting it on a piece of paper and like acknowledging it to yourself is a great place to start. All right, we're getting there. Number 8, 9, and 10 are also related. This is about our team. Who's going to be on our team? So, number 8 is who will be my sidekick or sidekicks. You can kind of think of like the Disney princesses. They always have like a cute little animal with them. But what is it? Like, who's going to be that person or a couple people that are your people no matter what? And they don't have to be like if you want to, move somewhere and be a chef. I think that was an example I used a minute ago. They don't have to have any culinary skills. This isn't about like who's going to, be in the kitchen sauteing while I'm roasting. I don't know how to cook. This is about like people that are going to be there for you no matter what. They're going to kind of fight for you however they can, be there to pick you up when you're down. Who are those people? Number 9, who on your team will offset you? Who's going to balance you out? Something like Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring is a great example of how, you've got this sort of hodgepodge of creatures and with different skills and different personalities. But throughout the story, they're offsetting, they're complementing each other. One's weakness is offset by another person's strength. And this is where this list can kind of build on each other, right? So as we think about like, okay, what are my potentially fatal shortcomings? Then think about who's going to be on my team that's going to help me offset that shortcoming. All right, number 10, who will be my guide, my mentor? Who's going to be the Gandalf, the Yoda, the Rafiki, whatever the story you want to put in there. Who's going to be that sort of wise figure who's walked the path before and is training us in the ways of the, whatever it is that we're doing? Who's going to be that person? And it might be someone you already have a relationship, and or it can be some people that you think you should reach out to, or like, you met once and you have their number, but like you should reach out to them again and say, hey, I'm getting serious about this. Would you be up for like, meeting for coffee or, whatever? All right, there it was, 10 questions. I'm going to hit them really quick. Number 1, where are you longing to go? Number 2, what is the home you have to leave? Number 3, what's at stake? Number 4, what is a doorway of no return you can and should walk through? Number 5, what are some of my superpowers? Number 6, what are some of my skills? Number 7, what are some of my potentially fatal shortcomings? Number 8, who will be my sidekick? Number 9, who will be on my team to offset my weaknesses? And number 10, who will be my guide, my mentor or mentors? Boom, just like that. That feels good, right? There's a ton of helpful stuff there. This is something that, obviously a list I made, but this is stuff that I'm trying to put into practice. And there's some things on that list I think I've done really well, really fleshing out. And there's some things on that list I'm like, gosh, I need to do that myself. That was a good idea I had when I wrote that down. I need to really put it into action. So I hope that is a help to you. Let's continue the conversation. Act 3. Sometimes I think that the real practical takeaway will be in Act 2, like today. And then other times it might sort of be switched, where it'll be like Act 2, here's a tool, and then we'll really get into the details of how we put that into action. But I think it's pretty clear, right? Take some time, and answer these questions for yourself. And then I was going to say, pick one question to take some concrete action in, in the next week before the next episode. So maybe, and maybe it's like really like go ahead and buy that ticket, sign up for that thing, like question number 4 about the inciting incident, like what is the doorway I need to walk through? Maybe you make that jump if you feel pretty clear about, what you want. Maybe you're like struggling to know what you want, or kind of get clarity on the exact details of it. So maybe you need to reach out to a sidekick or to a potential mentor, and just start that conversation. Additionally, some extra sort of next steps. Number 1, of course, just make sure that you are a part of this thing going forward. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, follow on Instagram. Just really excited about this. And not because I'm awesome, but because I'm excited about the potential for some real community, potential for some real positive impact, and honestly just some fun too. Like I'm excited about what this thing's going to be. So make sure you're a part of it going forward. Engage, comment, give me feedback. Yeah, and one more thing I would say too about just something helpful that I'm sure I'll reference a ton if you're going to be a part of this going forward, which I hope you are, is to keep a ongoing notebook, journal, either a folder on your phone or an actual pen and paper. I like both depending on what I'm doing. So whatever does it for you. And let that be your sort of quest, whatever you want to call it. If your name's Frank, call it Frank and the Quest, right? Because this is about your story and taking these things that we're talking about and how you're going to apply them to your life. So start that notebook, and then on the opening pages, start answering these 10 questions from this episode. For me, sort of that reflective, introspective writing is one of the single most important things I do on a somewhat regular basis. Number 1, just the simple act of writing, even if I never came back to it, the slowing down, the putting it down, helps me make sense of my own internal world. And then there's also a ton of value. And then later being able to go back and look at what I was processing or be reminded of things I've forgotten. So I can't recommend that enough. And then finally, don't go anywhere, because we are heading into what I'm going to be calling the epilogue of the episode. The epilogue is going to be just a casual conversation at the end, sometimes related maybe somewhat to what we were talking about, oftentimes not so much. Just maybe, pour a drink, snack. I probably won't snack, actually, because I don't want to do that on the microphone. It's a little gross, but you can snack. You can do what you want. Snack it up. Today's topic for the epilogue is going to be some creative lessons, or lessons about creativity, I should say, that I learned in 2020. So if you are on YouTube, the epilogue is going to be a separate video popping up somewhere on the screen. And if you are listening to the audio podcast, we'll just go right into it. All right? Pour yourself a drink, make yourself a snack. Let's hang out a little longer in the epilogue.